Welcome back to Before the Weekend, my weekly update on things that I consider as relevant, things that matter to me, and that I look at through the lens of noble purpose. 4 topics I have selected for this week's chat. First is the multi-stakeholder capitalism that I think is going to replace the activist, or that should replace activist shareholder short-term greed, and I'm using as business case what happened at Lannoo. The second topic is the tipping point, the ecological tipping point in the industry. The third topic that I have selected is about productivity versus priority overload. And the fourth is a more ethical approach. It's around the Vatican and their point on homosexuality is a sin. Welcome to this weekly update. Hope you will enjoy it. So the first topic is around the move from activist shareholder short-term greed to multi-stakeholder capitalism. What happened at Lannoo this week was really interesting to analyze. We saw the departure of Emmanuel Faber, who initiated a whole transformation around bringing noble purpose into the organization, and then at the same time the results, the financial results, didn't follow suit. The question is, how did that happen? And so I have a lot of questions actually around the situation. On the one hand, we have some minority shareholders. We have Artisan with about 3%, and we have Bluebell with less than 1% that have been pushing very hard to push out Faber, because the results were not, the profits were not as they wanted it. It's really interesting that people who represent 4 or 5% of shares of such a large organization can have such an impact. And I'm really questioning how that is going to evolve in the future with similar enterprises, with minority greedy shareholders wanting things like that to happen, only focusing on short-term profits. Now, at the same time, the fact that the figures didn't follow yet is also questionable. Why is that? Was the strategy not sufficiently aligned with the purpose, or is maybe the leadership style questionable, or is something else happening? And from my perspective is that it is very important that the board of directors is aligned, but also that minority shareholders that have a very short-term approach either are pushed out or are being put in the global board of directors approach to how the business should be evolving and how the business should be run. Second, an alignment between the board of directors and the management board. I have seen many cases where that has not happened and where that actually created a lot of tension. 3, the management board has to be aligned itself. And 4, the noble purpose has then to be communicated very clearly and well into the organization. Also interesting to see that Emmanuel Faber got a lot of criticism, and at the same time, almost the entire General Assembly, 99% of representatives, or those representing the shares, they actually voted in favor of the noble purpose plan that Faber had defined. So I really find it interesting what happened in the run of the deployment of the strategy. I do believe that value creation is really important, it's really key. But then the question is, what kind of value creation? And we sometimes see in organizations that value creation needs time before it can all become profitable. So how much were the different shareholders willing to take the time to let the new strategy kick in and to let the organization become as profitable as it could be? And then obviously they start comparing it with Nestle and with Unilever. By the way, Unilever also had been going through a very interesting period with Paul Polman that also had to deal with some very small minority shareholders who wanted to push the organization in a very different direction. Then I have a last remark which I find really interesting, that is that the advisor of Bluebell, which is one of the minority shareholders, was actually a former Danone executive who was actually in line to become the new CEO, but it was the former chairman, Frank Ribou, who actually decided to not choose this gentleman, but actually to let Emmanuel Faber become the new CEO. And what I have seen in organizations, and I'm not saying that that is the case, but it's at least food for thought and food for reflection, is some organizations, egos start really kicking in. And maybe there is also something happening in that area where the representative of Bluebell also felt that maybe this was payback time. Next, I want to talk about the tipping point in ecology and industry. A tipping point is a typical moment where you go to a point of no return. Something happens, an evolution is being seen, which really brings a different future, and you don't go back. This is actually what we have seen this week. Several things happened, really interesting things. The CEO, Herbert Diess of Volkswagen, announced that by 2030, 70% of all the cars in Europe, and all the brands, will be electrical. BMW's CEO, Olivier Zipse, announced that by 2030, also 50% of their cars will be electrical, and the Mini brand, will be entirely electrical by then. And he also said that he wants BMW to be the first greenest car in the world, by the way, how they build cars and recycle cars and connect with the principles of circular economy. We have seen that Solvay, Veolia and Renault have announced a partnership to start recycling used batteries from electrical cars and actually upcycle them to new batteries. And then we have also seen that ArcelorMittal has decided that the Ghent plant, which is one of their best plants, so to say, will produce by 2022 600,000 tons of steel with green steel certificates, which is a trend to something much bigger, knowing that the entire production is close to 72 million tons of steel. Now, what can we analyze with that? First of all, it is important that the influence of one entrepreneur visionary, and in this case, I'd like to praise the work of Elon Musk, has hugely influenced other CEOs and other enterprises to start going the same direction of producing electrical cars. Two, we have also seen the example of Ray Anderson with Interface, Industrial Carpets, who set an ambition to become an ecological enterprise, zero waste enterprise, I mean with that. Second analysis is that governments and industry really can influence each other and work together and have interest in working together, and the one can really influence and impact the other. Three is that industrial partners start working together in the case of Renault and Veolia and Solvay, which is actually really interesting, and some of them are actually even competitors in certain areas. And four, and probably the most important, is that ecology and economy start more and more working together, or start more and more being integrated instead of being separated, which we have seen for too many decades, and that is a real tipping point. The productivity versus priority overload is the third topic for this chat. What is the context? We see that more and more people start complaining about being confused about what they have to do as most important. There is a confusion about priorities. Everything actually seems to become a priority, especially since the pandemic started hitting hard, especially since many people are working from home. There is less connection with the team members, there is less connection with management and with leadership because we are working predominantly from home. So the impact this has on people is really serious. There is a lot of fatigue, there is a lot of burnout kicking in, and there is a lot of disengagement starting to happen. When we ask people in organizations recently now at these times, why is it that you do what you do? We too often hear, and we still too often hear, to make money, to generate money, and to create value for the shareholders. Shareholders, I'm saying, not stakeholders. So that obviously is very disengaging, because that is not what people get motivated by most. People do get mostly motivated and most motivated by something that gives meaning to their life. So here is a really interesting analysis. Very important is that organizations start focusing on their noble purpose to motivate the troops. That means that organizations need to have a noble purpose, a clearly defined, unique, specific noble purpose at the service of society, whatever that is, whatever works for each specific organization. Then it is important to engage the people on that. And what we see in organizations that have been very successful in defining their noble purpose and bringing that into the organization and involving all the stakeholders is that it really engages the people in the organization. So people become much more committed, people start working better, more aligned, people know much better how to prioritize and how to organize their time. So productivity goes up, financial performance goes up, people feel much more proud of their contribution, and actually everybody wins in such a context. So really very interesting move to do from overload of priorities to priorities coming from noble purpose. The huge missed opportunity for the Vatican to become a modern and inclusive organization is for me the fourth and the last topic of this before the weekend. I wanted to bring in something ethical. This week the Vatican announced that they consider homosexuality as a sin. Now, how can loving someone of the same sex be a sin? Knowing that a sin is a deliberate act of sinning. It's an act of choice. So I can't imagine that the enlightened Pope Francis would even think that loving someone of the same sex is a sin. Now, for me, it is much more a question of the way how an organization positions itself. I see the Vatican and what the Vatican represents as a very powerful organization with influence around the world. And what do you decide actually to put as priority? Is it to put as priority that homosexuality is a sin, which is also in the current context, the evolution that humankind is going through is quite outdated. It's like going back to the Middle Ages. And at the same time, there is the opportunity to bring new messages and to bring more modern messages and to stand for something which is more part of the evolution of humankind and of the modern times. So I'm really wondering, would they be aware of the collateral damage that this might create into different societies where there is still a lot of confusion around accepting or not accepting homosexuality, and what could have been the different approach to accepting homosexuality? I'm also wondering what the young generation will think about it, and if that is the approach to bring the young generation into the churches. I'm actually also wondering what the collateral damage is for the Vatican itself and the way how it is going to be seen as an outdated organization. And I'm actually wondering how hypocrites they can be, knowing that there is so much homosexuality in the church and especially in the Vatican. So it is all quite confusing, and I would like you to really reflect about authenticity and what really we should stand for as human race. And so my final thought is really about, is religion not all about love and about inclusion and about respecting each other? Or should it not become about love and inclusion and respecting each other? So some really philosophical thoughts to kick off the weekend. I hope you have enjoyed this week's Before the Weekend. Hope to see you back next week for some more reflections. Have a great weekend. All the best.